talking about the DRIs. We talked about the RDA, the EARs, the ULs. And we talked about your energy requirements. Okay? We talked about how those are going to differ. Person to person, it's going to differ by age, by gender. We talk about that in here somewhat? Okay. And let's see, let me find my notes. Okay, so these are recommendations. They are estimates, and they are to maintain energy balance. And what does energy balance mean? Basically, what you're taking in calorie-wise or energy-wise is about equivalent to what you're burning each day, which means what's going to happen to your weight if you're in energy balance. You're going to stay the same. You're going to maintain your weight. Right. So the energy requirements are based on maintaining your weight. It's also based on the assumption that you're at a healthy body weight or around a healthy body weight and that you do some physical activity. Okay? So they're based on that. I believe there is a... you can actually calculate your estimated energy requirements. If it's not in this chapter, it'll be in the next one. Okay, let's talk about the next DRI. These are referred to as AMDRs, acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges. Sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. Okay, what are your macronutrients? Or what are macronutrients? Ones you need, yeah, in larger amounts. So that's going to be your carbs, your protein, and your fat, right? So they've just told us how we estimate how many calories we need. Okay? So let's say we have figured out we need 1,800 calories. Where do we go from there? Great, we need 1,800 calories. How do we know what we need? How do we know how many calories should come from carbs, how many from protein, how many from fat? Well, that's what you use the AMDRs for. Okay? These are based on research, and these recommendations are designed to keep you healthy and also reduce disease risk. Okay, and we'll walk through some examples of these. But 45 to 65% of your daily calories should be from carbohydrate. 20 to 35% of your calories each day should be from fat. And 10 to 35% of your calories from protein. Okay? So, let's do an example. Let's say you estimated your energy needs and it's 1,800 calories. How do you figure out how much carbohydrate you need? Okay. If you look at the carbohydrate AMDR, it says 45 to 65% of your daily calories should be from carbohydrate. Okay? So 45% of those 1,800 calories up to 65% of those 1,800 calories should be from carbohydrate. Okay? So we'll just go ahead and calculate the range. 1,800 times 0.45. And then 1,800 times 0.65. What do you get for each of those? Who's got their calculator out?
What, 45 is 8? Yeah.
110.
65 is 1,170.
Okay. So does that mean 810 grams of carbs or 810 what? Calories. Carbohydrate calories, right? Okay. So this helps us sum. That means 810 to 1,170 calories out of the 1,800 should be from carbohydrates. But let's say we need to break it down further. How many grams of carbohydrate would this be? We've got 810 carbohydrate calories. How'd you figure out the grams?
We can divide by 4.
Uh-huh. So 810 divided by 4, and 1,070 divided by 4, and you get 202 grams, and this would be,
292.
thank you. So anywhere from 202 to 292 grams of carbohydrate per day. Okay? Now you can plan your meals and your snacks. Let's say you're going to have 36 grams of carbohydrate from the cereal at breakfast, and then you're going to have 45 at lunch, and you're going to have another 45 at dinner, and then you may have some carbs for snack. But you can plan those carbohydrates out throughout your day. That's how meal planning works, okay? Or it should work, okay? So you would do the same thing for fat. Multiply 1,800 by 0.2 and 0.35. Now, a lot of times what people do is, you might see someone who wants to eat kind of at the lower end of the carbohydrate. So let's say they want to get 45% from carbs. They're going to eat 30% fat. And so what would their protein be? Because percents have to add up to what?
100.
Okay? So then you can figure out exactly how many grams of carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Does everybody see that? Or you want me to go through the example? You're good. Okay. Okay. Also, someone may come to you and say, okay, I'm eating 2,000 calories, and I take in, let's see, 170 grams of protein. Let's see. Um, 200 grams of carb. Am I eating a healthy diet? How would you know? How would you assess this? Well, the remainder is going to be fat. They just didn't use the fat grams. How would you assess this? Okay, so let's look at how many protein calories they're getting. 170 times 4, right? Calories from protein. So 680 over 2,000 calories. Who can divide that for me? How much? 0.34. This means that 34% of their calories, daily calories, are coming from protein. Are they within the AMDR?
Yes.
Yeah. So their protein intake's okay. Okay? Carbohydrate. 800 calories. 800 over 2,000. carbohydrate intake?
Not what it should be.
Is it within the recommended range? No. Okay. Now, we know the protein calories and the carbohydrate calories, so let's figure out the fat intake. Because the rest has got to come from fat, right? Fat or alcohol, and we'll assume that it's fat. So 2,000 calories minus 800 and minus, let's see, gives you 520 calories coming from fat. 520 over 2,000 is what? So how's our fat intake?
Pretty good.
Does it fall from the range? Yes. Okay, everybody see where I am? 26%. So it's within that range of 20 to 35%. Okay, so what would you recommend to this person?
Go a little lighter on the protein.
Okay, and
Carbs.
in place of the protein, eat more carbs. Yes. Does everybody see why he's saying that? Y'all good? Okay. Okay, so those are your AMDRs. And so that is, once you get the calories that you need, this is how you figure out how much carbohydrate, how much protein, how much fat you need. Okay, a few notes about nutrient recommendations, like the DRIs, all the DRIs and all the recommendations we've just talked about. These are estimates, okay? These are estimates, and these are for healthy people. So if you're dealing with people who are malnourished, who have some kind of disease state, who may need supplementation, then you're going to have to adjust these, okay? These are recommendations. They are not minimum requirements. They are general recommendations. Variations may be needed. It is intended that you meet all these recommendations that we've talked about, the RDAs, the AMDRs, by eating a variety of foods. Okay, we talked about the apple and the chicken, right, in here, first day. Talked about the apple and how it's primarily composed of what?
Water.
Carbs and water. It's got a few vitamins and minerals in it. And we talked about the chicken, primarily composed of protein, some fat if it has the skin, and it's got some vitamins and minerals, but a different variety, okay? So you can see how every single food offers you a different assortment, particularly of those vitamins and minerals, but also of the carbs and the protein and the fat, okay? So it's intended that you're going to meet all these recommendations by eating a variety of foods, okay? And not necessarily from supplements. The best way to get your nutrients is through real food. Okay. Let's move on. Any questions so far? Okay, let's talk about nutrition assessment. So what happens when somebody consumes too much or doesn't consume enough of a nutrient? If you don't consume enough of something over time, it typically leads to a deficiency. Okay? And you typically start to see symptoms. Okay? Excess can lead to toxicity, like with your vitamins and minerals, but also excess energy intake leads to what? What's the side effect of excess energy intake?
Diabetes.
Possibly. What was the immediate direct effect of excess energy intake? No, y'all. Excess energy intake. What does energy mean? Calories. Excess calorie intake. You gain weight, right?
Oh.
You gain weight. Yeah. Okay, so that's going to be the immediate one. Now, yeah, that's going to put you at higher risk, so you're more likely to get type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, heart disease, that kind of thing. But so a deficiency or excess is going to eventually lead to malnutrition. Well, a lot of times we think of malnutrition and that it refers to just people who have deficiencies, don't get enough of certain things. But what they found recently is that all these obese individuals in our country are actually very malnourished as well. You might know why. Why would an obese person who takes in more calories than they need be malnourished?
Because all they eat is stuff that's terrible for them.
Okay.
It's not healthy foods or vitamins or they're not balancing their diet.
Okay.
So they get
They aren't gaining weight probably from eating the whole grains and the vegetables and the fruits and the lean proteins and healthy dairy, are they? They're gaining weight because they're eating some of those, but the most of their excess of calories are coming from added sugars and like sodas and desserts, fats and like chips and fast food and French fries and those kind of things. Okay? So you've got people who have excess weight, have this excess energy intake, but are malnourished in vitamins and minerals and fiber. Okay? Okay, there can be lots of different symptoms of malnutrition, but the bottom line is you're going to start to see side effects, whether you have someone who is undernourished or overnourished. Okay? I talk about a nutrition assessment. Okay? So if you are a dietitian and someone came to see you, or you're a dietitian working in a hospital or a nursing home, and you're seeing somebody for the first time, this is kind of how you go step by step. These are the different areas of information that you would need. The first thing that you're going to do is get what they call historical information. Okay, when I used to do nutrition counseling, this took the longest part. Okay, particularly if they'll really talk to you. But you want to know about their health history, what runs in their family. You want to know about their diet history. A lot of other stuff that's on here that I would ask about too, like what's their day, what's their normal day like? You know, are they commuting an hour and a half each way? That affects your food intake, doesn't it? And what you have time to cook. Okay. Are they working 2 jobs and going to school? I want to know that. Why would I want to know that?
To have time to.
That affects your food intake, right? You're more. You just got to grasp stuff. It helps me figure out how I might be able to help them figure out how to make better choices. Do they exercise? Do they like to exercise? Have they ever exercised? What's their schedule like? What's their intake like? What foods do they eat a lot? I might do a diet recall, which is where you either say, okay, I want you to keep write down what you eat for 3 days and bring it back, or you might say, okay, starting with when you woke up in the morning, tell me everything you ate and drank. Okay. The socioeconomic status is something that you kind of want to gather or figure out. You're not going to ask them directly, but you will kind of want to gauge through some type of question. Is money an issue for buying food? That type of thing. They say drug use here, but you just kind of want to get a whole picture of that person, their health, their eating habits, exercise habits, and kind of lifestyle in general, and anything that might affect their intake. Okay? So that's your historical information. Then you want to get anthropometric measurements. Okay? These are non-invasive measurements. Okay? So you're going to get their weight. You're going to get their height. You might take their waist circumference. You might measure their body fat. Okay? But just some basic measurements. Okay? Physical examination. This is not one you do typically unless you're in like a nursing home setting, that type of thing. But you can see malnutrition, particularly like if you see an elderly person that's malnourished. Or you'll see it like with eating disorder patients. Eating disorder or people with anorexia often have a very thick, actually have extra hair on their arms. There's a term for it, but they have kind of like an extra layer of hair, almost like fur, okay, to keep them warm. It's your body naturally protecting you. but you'll see that. With elderly people, dehydration is a big one. When you pull somebody's skin, if they're hydrated, it snaps back, like to normal, right? Okay? When you're dehydrated, that skin won't snap back. It's not going to be so elastic. It's going to kind of slowly go back down. Okay? So that can tell you their hydration status. You can look at their hair. Is their hair falling out? Is it thinning? You can look at their skin. Is it dry? Are there lesions? Those type of things. Okay? And then laboratory tests. You may need some of these. You may want to know their blood sugar. You may want to know cholesterol. And those types of things. Okay? So that would be the last component. And with all 4 of these, you can get a really good picture of what's going on with them nutritionally, and then kind of get together a plan of how you might help them. Okay, so there's 2 different types of deficiencies. There's a primary deficiency, and then there's secondary deficiency. Primary deficiency is where you just don't take in enough. So let's say you've got an iron deficiency, and it's a primary deficiency. So that means you just don't take in enough iron. Okay? So I'd work with you to try to figure out how we can get more foods that are rich in iron into your diet. Okay? Now, there's another deficiency, it's a secondary deficiency. What this is yes, you're taking in enough of a certain nutrient, but something's happening to it in the body. You see this sometimes with B12. Okay? B12, you have to have something that your GI tract releases in order to absorb B12. It's called intrinsic factor. Okay? So occasionally you see people who are taking in plenty of B12, and you see this in elderly people a good bit. They may be taking in plenty of B12, but their GI tract isn't making as much intrinsic factor. So because they aren't making that intrinsic factor, they can't absorb the B12. So their bodies aren't getting it. Okay? That's a secondary deficiency. Physical signs and symptoms that you see from a deficiency, like hair falling out, like dry skin, like the hair growth on the arms. Those are usually the last sign you see. Deficiency's got to be pretty bad at that point, and you'll see those referred to as overt. Okay? By that point, they're in your face. You can see them. Okay? A lot of times there may be a deficiency going on, but it's not quite as bad, and so it's just more kind of abnormal functions in the body. And you may not see or feel any side effects. It just may mean like your hemoglobin levels may be a little low, or your hematocrit may be a little low. Stuff like that. Okay, there are some national assessments of the population. They're constantly ongoing. They call them surveys. But basically, these are research studies that are constantly gathering information about what people are eating and their health within the United States. And these are constantly going on. They'll sample different parts of the country at different times. But they're gathering info like what people eat, their weight, their health status, they smoke, do they exercise, those types of things. And that is what they use, to assess like the American population's diet, to assess what the weight status is in the country, or what's happening to the weight trends, or people gradually gaining weight. It's also what they use to set national guidelines. Okay? Have you heard of Healthy People 2010 or 2020? Okay. Healthy People 2020, it's a public health program through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And it looks at this data and figures out, okay, what are the biggest threats to Americans' health? Okay? In regards to nutrition. And you'll see in your book, there's a table on table 1-4. It's got Healthy People 2020. So they set these in advance of the year 2020, and these are kind of goals. I'll read a few, but increase the proportion of adults who are at a healthy weight. Reduce the proportion of adults who are obese. So they're pretty general guidelines, but again, these are goals you're setting for the entire population, so you can't get too specific. They also survey, or they are able to look at trends going on. We'll talk more about trends in the next chapter. But what are some trends eating-wise or health-wise that you've seen in the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the United States?
Like Weight Watchers, something like that.
Okay, diets. And I don't know if diets have increased in popularity. They've always been pretty popular. But yeah, they continue to be popular. What else?
What do you mean by trend?
Okay, I'll give you an example. Americans now eat much more food away from home. Meaning, they may not eat it at a restaurant, but they're not cooking at home. They're picking it up, or they're eating at a restaurant, or they're grabbing it somewhere and eating it in their car. That type of thing. That's a trend. The amount of cooked meals at home has drastically gone down, and the amount of money we spend on food away from home has drastically gone up. What about with our health or our weight? Yeah, the proportion, 2/3 of the population is either overweight or obese. That is a drastic increase. The amount of children that are overweight or obese has gone up. Okay? About the prevalence of type 2 diabetes, gone up. Okay? Another one is we snack more. Okay? We tend to snack more rather than eating meals. Right? And it's probably because of the prevalence of food. You know, probably there wasn't food on every corner or down every hall, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Okay? You ate your meals because you didn't have access to food everywhere. Now we have access to food everywhere. So we're bigger snackers. Okay? So that's what I mean by trends. And they'll change over time. Okay, these are the those Healthy People 2020 goals that I mentioned. You'll see those in your book. Okay, let's talk about diet and health. Food is really key, or what you eat is key in keeping you healthy. It can keep you healthy or it can make you unhealthy. Okay, we've seen both extremes of that. What they talk about in your book is chronic diseases. Okay? Chronic diseases are those that you develop and then you continue to have. They don't go away. They are typically lifestyle related. What do I mean by lifestyle related?
It affects their life.
They're what?
Brought on by life choices.
Yes, they're brought on by life choices, okay? Think about this. If we get the flu, we can't control that, right? We can wash our hands really good. We can try to stay away from people that are sick. But if you get the flu or a cold, you can't do much to prevent that, okay? Right? Diseases like diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, for the most part, we can prevent those through our lifestyle, through our diet, through our activity, through not smoking, through alcohol, moderation, or not drinking. That's what I mean by lifestyle-related diseases, okay? The leading cause of death, anybody know what the leading cause of death was back in the 1900s? What would it be? Huh? Yes, very good. Infectious diseases, okay, like the flu. Plague. The flu would hit a town, and it's what they call the plague, and it just wiped communities out, right? Okay. Medicine and science have gotten much better. We've got antibiotics, we've got good drugs, we know how to treat things. Infectious diseases are not the leading cause of death anymore. What is the leading cause of death now? Your lifestyle-related diseases. Okay? Look, there's a chart in your book, right here. And you'll see, number 1 is heart disease, which includes heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, blood clots. 2 is cancer. 3 is lung disease. 4 is stroke. 5 accidents. 6 Alzheimer's. 7 diabetes. 8 pneumonia and influenza. 9 kidney disease. 10 suicide. Okay, heart disease, cancer, strokes, diabetes. 4 of the top 10 are lifestyle related, meaning we can control those somewhat. Genetics will play a role in there too, but for the most part, we can do things in our life with our eating, with our exercise, with smoking, with alcohol to lessen the risk, right?
Did you not help with kidney disease?
Probably, depending on what the cause was, yeah. There are some kidney diseases that are triggered by excess weight and that kind of thing, yeah. Okay, so what are risk factors? Okay, these are behaviors or conditions that put you at a higher risk of getting a disease. For instance, smoking cigarettes is a risk factor for lung cancer. Okay? Risk factors, smoking does not mean you will get lung cancer, right? But you are at much higher risk. You have a much higher likelihood of developing lung cancer than someone who doesn't smoke cigarettes, right? Okay. So that's what risk factors are. And when you have several risk factors for a disease, then you're even more likely to get that disease. You're at an even higher risk. For example, you have someone who's obese, who's physically inactive, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Well, being inactive is a risk factor for heart disease. Having high blood pressure is a risk factor for heart disease, for having a heart attack or stroke. High cholesterol is a risk factor for having heart disease. High blood pressure and high cholesterol. What can you do to improve those?
Eat healthier.
Change your diet. Okay. Being inactive.
Exercise.
Yeah. So you can decrease those risk factors. But when you start seeing 3 or 4 or 5 risk factors, like someone's inactive, they're obese. So obesity is a risk factor for heart disease. They're obese, they're inactive, they have high cholesterol, high blood pressure. Well, now you've got 4 risk factors for heart disease. So now you're like quadrupling the likelihood that you'll get heart disease. Okay? So a lot of these risk factors, these lifestyle risk factors, kind of play together and can build on each other. Here are the top risk factors. Let's see how they phrase this. The most prominent factor contributing to 1 of every 5 deaths in the United States is tobacco use. So if you had to change one lifestyle thing and you smoked or chewed tobacco, that would be it. Okay? The next one, though, is diet and activity. Working on improving your diet. Doesn't mean your diet has to be perfect, but trying slowly to make better food choices and being more active. Okay? Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Read the section at the end of your book. It is on misinformation. And I think I've already mentioned, but there's a lot more nutrition junk out there than there is facts. Okay? This section will give you guidelines. Well, let me also say, most of that junk comes from the internet. Okay, because what do we, if we want to know answer to something, where do we look? We Google it. Okay, we get on the internet, right? And if it's on the internet, then it's the truth, right? Not necessarily, okay? So particularly with your science stuff, you want to be careful. So this gives you guidelines on how to make sure it's reliable information. Anytime somebody's trying to sell you something or wants you to pay money, it's kind of a red flag, okay? Your safe sites that you know are research-based are going to be ones that end in .gov, .edu, .org. They're either by an educational foundation or a research institute or some an organization like the American Heart Association, or they're with the USDA or something like that. So read through that. Also, they talk about nutrition experts. And you want to make sure you go to a registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist. There's a lot of trainers, personal trainers, who will take a class, a self-study thing, and call themselves a nutritionist. They are not a dietitian or a registered nutritionist. Okay? They took one course. Registered dietitians have to get a 4-year degree in food nutrition. They have to do a 1-year internship, supervised internship, and then sit for a national credentialing exam, and then do continuing education every year. Okay? Kind of like being a nurse or another person that's got to sit, there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through. So you want to make sure you go to someone like that and not someone that's just taken a home study course or has read a lot of nutrition books or that type of thing. Okay? So read through that section at the end of the book. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end lecture here since we are a little ahead, and we'll start chapter 2 at the next class.